You are brushing your teeth when a sharp pain flashes through one side of your jaw. For a moment, the mirror and the morning light almost disappear because your attention has been pulled into one small point inside your mouth where something has started to feel wrong. Then the modern world quietly catches you. You know there is a dentist somewhere, a painkiller in a drawer, and a language for what might be happening. Cavity, infection, abscess, inflammation. Even before anyone treats you, the fear is smaller because the problem has a name. Your ancestors did not have that comfort. To them, the same pain would not arrive with the diagnosis, but as a warning from a hidden place in the body. A tooth could swell until eating became difficult, a wound could grow hot after a hunt, and a fever could rise while the person still looked whole from the outside. Nothing obvious was attacking. There was no animal to chase away, no claw mark to explain the danger, and no clear line between a body that might recover and a body that was beginning to fail. Illness could enter quietly, change the rules from within, and force everyone nearby to decide whether to wait, act, or risk making things worse. A wrong choice could cost a life. So what did ancient humans use to heal themselves when sickness became serious? The answer begins not with a cure, but with a mystery. Some ancient bodies survived damage that should have ended the story. Most sickness disappears after death. Fever leaves no fossil, stomach pain leaves no mark on stone, and infection can kill without leaving a clean record in the ground. So researchers follow the few traces that remain. Teeth lost long before death, bones that healed, skulls changed by disease, and injuries that should have made survival almost impossible. One of the oldest clues comes from Dmanisi in Georgia. Researchers studied the skull and jaw of an early human who lived about 1.77 million years ago, and David Lord Kipanidze and his team reported that this individual had lost almost every tooth years before death. Only one tooth remained. A nearly toothless person in the ancient world could not simply choose soup, soft bread, or dental treatment. Food might be tough, fibrous, dry, or hard, and without normal chewing, every meal could become a problem that returned again and again. Yet this person kept living for years. The fossil cannot show the exact help, but it asks a question that is hard to avoid. Did others soften food, share easier pieces, or allow a weak person to stay close when leaving them behind would have been easier? One early form of healing may have been care, not a magical plant or a ritual cure, but the daily work of keeping a struggling body alive. Someone had to bring water, share calories, prepare food differently, and give time to a person who could not help much that day. Care sounds gentle, but it was expensive. In a small group, every mouth mattered. A person who could not gather, hunt, carry, or chew still needed food and protection, which meant the group had to decide whether a damaged body was worth the cost. The bones suggest that sometimes the answer was yes. At Cima de los Huesos in Spain, Ana Gracia and her colleagues examined the skull of a Middle Pleistocene child with craniosynostosis, a condition in which parts of the skull fuse too early during growth. The child survived for years. Stone and bone cannot tell us the emotions around that child, but survival itself matters, because healing was not always the act of fixing a body. Sometimes it meant making space for one that could not be fixed. That same idea appears in one of the most famous Neanderthal skeletons ever found. At Shanidar Cave in Iraq, Shanidar I carried a life written in damage, injuries to the face and arm, and later evidence suggesting hearing loss. In that world, hearing was part of survival. A warning call could save a life, movement in the grass could signal danger, and a voice behind you could tell you where the group was moving. Serious hearing loss was not a small inconvenience. It could change how a person met every day, yet Shanidar I lived for many years. That does not prove a perfect story of kindness, but it shows something powerful enough. A damaged person could continue living inside a group that made survival possible. A weak body could survive inside a stronger social world. But care could not answer every pain. A swollen tooth still throbbed, a wound still burned, and stomach sickness could drain a person until standing became difficult. If ancient people only waited and hoped, many bodies would have failed sooner. So researchers looked for treatment in a strange place: old dental plaque. At El Cedron Cave in Spain, scientists studied hardened plaque from Neanderthal teeth. Dental calculus can trap traces of plants, food, microbes, and whatever passed through the mouth. Laura Weyrich and her team used ancient DNA from this calculus to study diet and disease. One Neanderthal showed signs linked to a dental abscess and a gut pathogen. In the same mouth, researchers found traces connected to poplar, a plant that contains salicylic acid, the chemical family behind aspirin, and DNA connected to penicillium, a mold group known today because some species produce antibiotics. This does not mean Neanderthals had modern medicine. They did not have aspirin tablets or penicillin pills. But the evidence suggests they may have used plants and natural materials in ways that mattered when the body was suffering. Before chemistry, there was experience. A person tries bark, a bitter plant, or something growing nearby. Maybe nothing happens, or maybe the pain changes enough to be remembered. Over time, the memory of what helped becomes a tool as real as stone. Some problems demanded more than plants. At Mehrgarh in Pakistan, archaeologists found evidence that is difficult to imagine without wincing. Andrea Coppa and his team identified 11 drilled molar crowns from 9 adults in a Neolithic graveyard dating to about 7,500 to 9,000 years ago. These were not random cracks after death. The teeth had been drilled while people were alive, likely with small stone tools. Picture the decision behind that moment: a damaged tooth, a person in pain, another person holding a tool, and the belief that doing something painful might still be better than letting the pain continue. That is not modern dentistry, but it is treatment. It shows that ancient healing was not only waiting, feeding, and hoping. Sometimes people acted directly on the body using skill and nerve. The strongest example of direct intervention comes from Borneo. Archaeologists found the skeleton of a young person who lived around 31,000 years ago, and Tim Maloney and his team reported that the lower part of the left leg had been removed in what appears to have been a deliberate surgical amputation. The most important detail was not only the missing leg, it was the healed bone. This person survived for years afterward, which means the operation was not the end of the story. Someone had to remove part of a limb without killing the patient immediately, control bleeding well enough for survival, protect the wound as it closed, and support a body that would move differently forever. That was not one dramatic moment. It was a long commitment. Now the answer becomes clearer. Ancient humans did not heal serious illness with one thing. They used a system made from care, food, water, rest, plants, tools, memory, patience, and other people. Some treatments worked, some failed, and many people still died. Their world was not gentle. A fever could take a child, a wound could rot, and a toothache could become deadly. Serious illness in the ancient world should not be turned into a comforting story. But they were not helpless. They watched bodies suffer and recover, remembered which plants seemed to change pain, softened food for people who could not chew, drilled teeth when pain became unbearable, and even cut bone when a limb could not be saved. They stayed near people during the dangerous time after the dramatic moment had passed. Modern medicine often looks like a product, a pill, a scan, a prescription, or a surgery. But long before medicine became an institution, healing was already a relationship between a suffering body and the people who refused to leave it alone. Someone noticed when the body changed, remembered what helped before, and stayed long enough for healing to have a chance. So what did ancient humans use to heal serious illness? They used whatever they could understand: plants, tools, food, rest, and knowledge built from watching bodies over many generations. But underneath all of it was something older than medicine itself. They used each other: a toothless human, a child with a skull condition, a wounded Neanderthal, and a person who survived amputation 31,000 years ago, all point toward the same truth. Ancient healing did not begin when humans found the perfect cure. It began when someone decided that another body in pain was still worth saving.